Epistemology, often known as the theory of knowing, has been a major concern of philosophers since the time of Descartes. The ultimate goal of epistemology is to establish a solid foundation by exploring topics such as the acquisition of knowledge, the definition of proof, and the justification of specific ideas. Skeptics often challenge these objectives, testing our ability to hold justified beliefs about the nature and boundaries of knowledge. Active engagement with skepticism motivates epistemologists to thoroughly and critically examine the foundations of knowledge and construct theories that can withstand skeptical inquiries. Ludwig Wittgenstein, a prominent philosopher of the 20th century, explored skepticism extensively in his writings. While he may not explicitly stress skepticism like Descartes or Hume, his views offer explanations for skeptical inquiries. Traditional reasoning methods attempt to address skepticism by asserting the presence of objective reality. Wittgenstein, however, aimed to illuminate the boundaries of doubt by revealing its limitations. He acknowledged that ambiguity is an inherent aspect of human inquiry and comprehension. Nevertheless, he held the belief that skepticism required strong reasoning and a reasonable foundation for counterarguments. Otherwise, their arguments become pointless and meaningless. This presentation is about how Wittgenstein's philosophical inquiries underscore the constraints of skepticism while also providing insightful elucidations on the notion of certainty in the pursuit of knowledge. Part 1: Wittgenstein's critique of skepticism reveals its constraints and insufficiency. Wittgenstein's refutation of skepticism is well demonstrated in his extensive argument on More's notable arguments, often referred to as the two hands argument. More stated two premises using a basic deduction method: here is one hand, followed by extending his left hand and stating, and here is another. From these premises, More drew the conclusion that he had proved ipso facto the existence of external things in the world. More argued that just showing the appearance of two hands was sufficient to convey direct, immediate, and definite knowledge of the existence of the external object. He asserted that direct perception, not inference, is the source of this knowledge. More presented this argument to counter skeptical arguments that cast doubt on our understanding of the outside world. It's worth noting that More's two-hand argument has sparked significant philosophical discussion and study over the years, with several replies and counterarguments presented. Ludwig Wittgenstein had a critical perspective on More's argument involving two-hand arguments. Wittgenstein's criticism of More centered on the limitations of More's approach to philosophy, particularly his reliance on supposed self-evident truths, simplistic arguments, and foundationalist approaches to philosophy that overlook the complexities of language and meaning. Wittgenstein considered More's response to skeptics inadequate. He believed that the crucial argument against skepticism should focus on the sensibility, validity, and sustainability of their doubt. By questioning the underlying assumptions of skeptical arguments, Wittgenstein intended to undermine the very foundations on which skepticism rests. In Tractatus Wittgenstein remarked, "Skepticism is not irrefutable but obviously nonsensical when it tries to raise doubts where no questions can be asked. For doubt can exist only where a question exists, a question only where an answer exists, and an answer only where something can be said." This is a revolutionary insight which Wittgenstein continued to develop in his later writings. Through this insight, Wittgenstein was able to nullify the arguments of skeptics by unveiling their meaninglessness, which he believed that More failed to understand. According to him, certain propositions must be excluded from doubt. In the case of such an ordinary doubt about the existence of two hands, it could be easily resolved with no further extensive argument or justification but by simply taking a closer look at our hands. Wittgenstein remarked, "If, for example, someone says, 'I don't know if there's a hand here,' he might be told, 'Look closer.' This possibility of satisfying oneself is part of the language game. Is one of its essential features. In that sense, there is no need for any serious dialectical rebuttal to prove the existence of the hands. It appears that the skeptics have excessively magnified their skeptical arguments, casting doubt on everything." Wittgenstein argues that when there is a requirement for a thorough argument to offer proof for a doubt, It may indicate the presence of a conceptual misunderstanding that gives rise to the illusions of skeptical doubts, and it must explain why the skeptic fails to see the illusion for what it is. Wittgenstein proposed that skepticism may arise from confusion, delusion, or a misunderstanding of the semantics of language, rather than being a legitimate philosophical stance. Counterarguments are unnecessary to debunk or dispel this kind of illusion or misconception. Instead, we need therapeutic intervention to remedy the illusion of meaning. The issue is not about doubting, but whether we understand what it would be to doubt them. Wittgenstein argued that justifiable reasoning or foundation is necessary, even in the face of doubt. He demonstrated that even if one should enter the domain of skepticism, one must first fully explain any possible error that may have occurred. Without the ability to determine precisely the manner in which an error has occurred, there can be no logical demonstration of doubt. To further unveil the non-sustainability of the skeptic's arguments, Wittgenstein exposed the misuse of the expression, "I know," exemplified in More's refutation against skepticism. According to Wittgenstein, the expression, "I know," is a logical realization that indicates certainty and needs no further demonstration or justification. Wittgenstein remarked that More's use of the expression, "I know," denotes a fact that describes a state of affairs which guarantees what is known, guarantees it as a fact. More, following the traditional argument, wanted to assure the skeptic that he knows there are physical objects. Wittgenstein pointed out that More, on the contrary, had misunderstood the whole dynamic of the skeptic's argument. According to Wittgenstein, the skeptics were not looking for reassurance, as understood by More. Instead, the skeptics believed that they had discovered a valid foundation for counterarguments. It is this validity that we should question, especially its intelligibility. To demonstrate this, Wittgenstein gave an example. "I know that there's a sick man lying here," used in an unsuitable situation, seems not to be nonsense but rather seems matter of course, only because one can fairly easily imagine a situation to fit it, and one thinks that the words, "I know that," are always in place where there is no doubt, and hence even where the expression of doubt would be unintelligible. According to Wittgenstein, lack of justification, sustainability, and the misconception of the meaning of the words have led many skeptics to present incoherent arguments, which expose the groundlessness of their doubts. Stringing together some words to form sentences does not necessarily guarantee a meaningful and reasonable argument. Words or questions must be contextually sound and legitimate. Sometimes, what seems to be intelligible is not intelligible at all. It is necessary that the skeptics present valid and justifiable reasons to doubt, and by doing so, they should be able to point out the possibility of mistakes in an intelligible way by providing an adequate amount of evidence to doubt so that correction may take place. If the skeptics are unable to do this, then doubt has not taken place, and the notion, "I know," in reference to existential reality remains valid and reinforced. Wittgenstein wrote, "If I know something, then I also know that I know it, etc., amounts to, I know that means I am incapable of being wrong about that. But whether I am so, needs to be established objectively." Part 2, From Doubt to the Notion of Certainty. Having highlighted certain inconsistencies, incoherence, and lack of sustainability in skeptical arguments, Wittgenstein expounded on the subject matter of doubting in the context of language games. Wittgenstein's philosophy establishes a connection between doubt and the interpretation of language games. Wittgenstein recognized that doubt can arise within the context of language games when there is uncertainty or confusion about the meaning of propositions. According to Wittgenstein, understanding the meaning of language is not solely a matter of grasping individual words or isolated propositions. Instead, meaning emerges from the use of language within specific social practices and contexts. Language games provide the framework within which words and propositions acquire their meaning. Therefore, if one should engage in meaningful doubt or skepticism about a proposition, one must first ascertain its meaning within that particular language game. In exploring the dynamic of the language game and searching for certainty, he observed that when doubt arises, it often indicates a breakdown in understanding, a lack of clarity, or ambiguity and inconsistencies in the way language is used in a particular context. These uncertainties prompt us to scrutinize the circumstances more closely. While we can raise questions and doubts regarding specific facts or situations, we cannot doubt everything. There are certain foundational facts or assumptions that we rely on and are not subject to doubt in our everyday judgments and actions. Wittgenstein addressed this explicitly in his philosophical work, On Certainty. We could doubt every single one of these facts, but we could not doubt them all. Wouldn't it be more correct to say, we do not doubt them all? Our not doubting them all is simply our manner of judging, and therefore of acting. A doubt that doubted everything would not be a doubt. If you tried to doubt everything, you would not get as far as doubting anything. The game of doubting itself presupposes certainty. This is to say, there will come a time when the condition of uncertainty progressively reaches a state of complete exhaustion, namely, the state of being beyond doubt, which in turn can become the basis for certainty. Wittgenstein's point is that our not doubting all facts is not a sign of weakness or inconsistency, but rather a fundamental aspect of our manner of judging and acting. It implies that our implicit acceptance of certain facts or assumptions shapes our judgments and actions. It is through this acceptance that we establish a foundation of certainty that allows us to navigate the world and engage in meaningful discourse. It is within this framework that we find certainty and meaningful engagement with the world. In Wittgenstein's works, it is evident that there are some assertions in human language that are beyond dispute and immune from examination, which he referred to as hinges. He observed, that is to say, the questions that we raise and our doubts depend on the fact that some propositions are exempt from doubt, are as it were like hinges on which those turn. These unique hinge propositions cannot be disputed or proven, since we must first accept them as true in order to create any questions or arguments. Therefore, while the foundations of our knowledge are based on these specific premises, every exploration into the growth of our understanding relies on their validity. When examining our skeptical arguments, we find that their fundamental assumptions and outcomes indicate that doubt can only exist within a framework of certainty. As a result, skepticism cannot provide a definitive conclusion. After careful examination of Wittgenstein's writings on skepticism, it is evident that he effectively exposed its flaws, lack of durability, and unsupported arguments. These reasons for uncertainty seem to present a strong argument against skepticism. His arguments against skepticism not only reveal the absence of explanations for some questions about our understanding of the external world, but also imply that these doubts do not impact a significant portion of our beliefs. The presence of such knowledge that defies skepticism is undeniable. Throughout human history, specific concepts and principles have remained enduring values. These realities are eternal, basic, and indisputable. They have endured the test of time and sustainability, demonstrating their worth and ongoing significance from generation to generation. This eternal knowledge embodies the unchanging principles that surpass doubt and serves as a guiding light for truth and insight. When faced with the vastness and intricacy of knowledge, we must exhibit humility, recognizing the constraints of our understanding and conceding that there may exist truths or ideals that are beyond our comprehension. This multimedia presentation is created by Robert Daniel Francis.